trying to reduce the glare, but I think I've made it worse. Give me just 1 second. Seems like if I scoot down a little bit, it's a little bit better. Okay. Well, today we are going to be, that's a little bit better. Okay. Let's try and turn it. Maybe that'll work. Okay. Today we are going to be talking about what books our boys are reading. Now, I was in the car the other day with all of my children. I can't remember where we were driving. And I said, my daughter is always talking about books, my oldest daughter, and she and I share a lot of the same type of book genre that we like to read. And so she's been rereading Harry Potter and Michael Vey and Percy Jackson and The Maze Runner. In fact, I even had to not ban her from certain books, but ban her from reading the same books within too short of a period of time. So it's like, you can only read this once this year or once in this 6 months. So anyway, she was talking about this and it just like sprung up in my mind that she reads a lot of books with boy heroes. And that's awesome. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that at all. But she has a twin and I just thought to ask like my son, hey, what books have you read with female leads or female protagonists? And he couldn't think of any of them. So it really took me down this deep rabbit hole of why that is. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So thank you everybody for tuning in today. Please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And please leave your comments. Leave your questions and your thoughts in the comments and we'll talk about them and it'll spur this whole discussion. So as always, I am just an expert in my own opinion and that's all we're talking about today. Just my opinion, the research that I've done. I've gotten a lot of kickback, so I will include in the notes, in the comments below, a lot of the stuff that I did to research this, but a lot of this is just my observations and my own thoughts. And some of it is just perspective and, life and books that I've read. We're going to talk a lot today about this book. It's called A Hero with 1,000 Faces, and it's going to talk a lot about the journey that we're going to go on today. But I have a list of questions, and we're going to go through those, and we're just going to talk about what we think about the implications of this and is it a problem just in my house, or is it an overarching problem? Is it a problem at all? So these are some of the things we're going to talk about. Okay. So let's get into it. Number one, why does this matter? Why does it matter if our girls read books with boy protagonists? And why does it matter if our boys read books with girl protagonists? Well, it matters. I'd love to hear your comments. Do you think it matters? And why do you think it matters? I think it matters. And I am going to show off a whole bunch of other people that agree with that. But it matters because this is the world that we live in. We don't live in a predominantly male society and we don't live in a predominantly female society. In fact, our society throughout all periods of time have primarily been pretty much structured 50-50. We pretty much have equal numbers of males and females that live on the earth. And we have a lot of talk. And I did not expect this. I did not expect this simple question, a question of, are you reading boy books? Are you reading girl books? To delve down this deep, dark rabbit hole of toxic masculinity. And before I go any further, I just want to clarify, toxic masculinity, although it's been given the term masculinity, is really just the idea or the predominance or the effect or acting out in a way that is dominating. And we're going to see that. We're going to see that in our hero journeys. We're going to see that in our protagonists. We're going to see that in the type of books that we read. So why does it matter? It matters because if we're only reading one side of things, if we're only reading one type of character, if we're only reading one type of journey, then we are not getting a full experience. And we are not experiencing, you know what, I'll get to that. Let me go on. We have a comment. How many books do you have on your shelf? Oh, this is just one. This is actually our bookshelf that we haven't read yet. So huge shout out to my friend who worked at the Scholastic bookstore and let me go to the employee bookstore. That was a dream. I mean, you have the massive warehouse of all the books that Scholastic has printed. and you get the pickings for it at employee prices. Absolutely phenomenal. So this is our bookshelf. This is just the books we haven't read yet. And a lot of the reason we haven't read any of these books is because we don't have the incomplete series. But I've got all of my kids have bookshelves in their room, and it's this tall. They're all five shelf bookshelves. When we recently moved here, we live in Texas right now, we still have boxes of books that we didn't unpack because we'd already read those. And I knew we had all these books. I brought a box. I went to the bookstore right before we moved. I got each of my kids a box of books. So a lot. Yeah, shout out to them. Tell them Piku says they're the real MVP. Yes, absolutely. Probably upwards of thousands of books in our house. And my husband, every time we move, is like, let's get rid of some books. And I'm like, not a chance. It's not going to happen. I do have gardening books. I've got books on just about every topic. I've got tons of writing books. I am a writer. I've got tons of fictional, lots of middle grade. I focus on middle grade adventure books, tons and tons and tons of adventure books. I have a whole list that I want to go over at the end of the stream about books that I recommend. So if you want to stick around for that. Yep. Oh, tons. All the cooking books I've got an entire yellow, we call it our yellow hutch, and it's got doors with chickens on it. And all of my cooking books are in there. There's at least 50 that I can count. I was actually just thinking I should box those up because we're in the process of moving. So yeah, I have books on literally everything. And this is such a good point because we should not just have books about one type of story. And this is, again, I'm only an expert in my own opinion. But when we have books that run the entire gamut of type of genre, right? So adventure, cooking, I mean, we're talking about nonfiction a lot in these. So cooking, gardening, right? But we also have genres that are like fiction, historical fiction. And let me just tell you from a author perspective, writers do not just go sit at their computer and just pull things out of their head. Okay. They may have like a base idea. They may have a creative idea or a story plot line, but there is an intense amount of research that goes into an author's work before they sit down or as they're sitting down while they're writing their novel. They are making sure that if they write a police character, that they know what it's like to go to the police academy. As an author, we have conversations, we have interviews with our characters. We learn about where they went to school, what that school was like. We go and tour. Like, in fact, my family and I were driving back to the Dallas area from the Austin area. And we decided to go to the National Funeral History Museum. Okay. It's just outside of San Antonio. So we were around that area. Okay. And I ran into somebody from my writers group because he was writing a story about a ghost. And it's a fascinating story. You all should look it up when it comes out. I'll have to get the name I'll get the author's name. I know his name is Blair, but I'll have to get his name. It's from what I've heard of, it's going to be so funny. So he was going to do research about the time period, National Funeral History Museum, to find out about how funerals were done, the type of caskets, hearses, right? Everything that goes along with that. Excuse me. So when you are reading, it doesn't matter if it's fictional or it's non-fictional. Your author, the author that wrote this book, has spent an immense amount of time researching so that they can give you the most real experience. They can give you, a really complete experience. And when characters are going through emotions, those are real emotions that either the author has felt or the author has witnessed or the author has interviewed somebody having those deep, deep emotions. And really, when it comes down to it, ultimately, that's why it's so important for us to read across genres, across genders, so that we can grasp, we can hold on to, and we can experience this entire range of emotions, an entire range of life experiences. And that's what makes us a complete human being. So you'll hear a lot. We all hear this, right? In our lives, we hear this all the time. Like, we appreciate other people's perspectives, where they've lived, what they've lived through, what they've experienced. We can learn those things with books too, with characters in books. In fact, I have this great quote I was going to talk about later, but I'm just going to pull it up now. It's so great. It's from an article on Why Boys Should Read Girl Books by Carolyn Paul. And it says, we read to experience a panoply of perspectives. We read to learn of people and situations outside and beyond ourselves so that we can deepen our connection and understanding. We read to prepare for life. It follows then that we are raising our boys to dismiss other people's experiences and to see their needs and concerns as the center of things. We are raising our boys to lack empathy. So that is what happens when we only read a certain gender or a certain type of story. We don't experience this full panoply of perspectives. I absolutely love that quote. I think it is so rich and so profound. Okay, let's go to, so that's why I think it's important. And again, please let me know, what you think in the comments. All right, so that was a little segue. Why or what are the implication of boys only reading stories about boys? So number one, I'll just go over that quote again. They only see the needs and concerns of boys. They lack empathy. Can boy characters have empathy? Absolutely. Absolutely. But if they're only hearing the perspective of the boy's story and the boy's empathy of what the boy thinks is important, then yeah, they are missing. They're missing both sides of it, a double-sided equation of that. Okay. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out, let me see if I have it right here. Okay, well, I don't have it right here, and I don't want to take a ton of time to try and find it. So the implication is that boys only see things from a male perspective. And so you know what? I'm not going to go there yet. So let's just wait. Okay. So then let's ask the opposite question. What are the implications of girls only reading stories about their own internal journeys, right? The heroine story is predominantly emphasized about saving herself, and usually saving herself from, a male suppression. So there's a huge book out right now. It's actually been out for a while. It's a 12-book series. It's called The Unselected Journals of Emma Lyons. And I got to tell you, I'm sorry, you can give me all the grief you want in the comments. I thought this book was so boring. Everybody was like, oh, if you love Pride and Prejudice, right? Which that's a completely internal story about girls, right? She overcomes this external force where she has to overcome her preconceived notions about Mr. Darcy. And then she's allowed to be in a marriage where she has love, right? That's a completely internal. She's not really overcoming. She's not saving anything. She's not saving anyone. So the Unselected Journals of Emma Lyons, number one, as an author, this book drove me crazy because it was so incredibly boring. Okay. Full disclosure, I only read book one because I could not get past how many times she was described walking up and down the stairs. That was so insanely boring to me. And number two, I just didn't want to read another story about a male having all the power, all the dominance, suppressing the girl, and then her character arc is overcoming him. Like, I want to read a story like The Midnight Hour, which is it's a middle grade fictional story where she actually saves the world, right? We've got The Hobbit. He saves the world. We've got The Maze Runner. He saves the world. We've got Harry Potter. He saves the world. Percy Jackson. He saves the world. Michael Vey. He saves the world. Where are all of our girls that save the world? Girls want to read those stories. We know it because they're reading the boy books. They want to read those stories. And when they only read about them, when boys are saving the world, it internalizes that only boys can save the world. And when boys only read books where boys are saving the world, it internalizes that only boys can save the world. So what are we teaching our kids? What do we want to teach our children about their potential? What do we want to teach them about what they're capable of? What do we want to teach them about what they can accomplish if they have the fortitude, the courage, the desire? Girls need courage just as much as boys do, and boys need empathy and love and understanding just as much as girls do. We have lived in a culture, and I'm not talking about the United States of America where I live, over time, historically, since the prehistoric time, since since ancient Mesopotamia, we have constantly lived in a world with male dominance. And we as a society are saying no to that, right? But it's really only been in the last few years. So we need this trend to continue through books. Okay. So let's go on to let's talk about this. Okay, so this book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, written by Joseph Campbell. So it's a pretty thick book. It's really fascinating. In fact, I went to a writer's conference back in October, and somebody gave a class on this book and how the hero's journey, and again, we have hero, but hero just means somebody who saves something. It's not exclusive to male or female. And he gave this whole class on how the hero's journey it follows a specific path, right? It follows a specific set of trends, and it goes in a specific order. And in fact, he even pointed out that the book, Sam I Am, Green Eggs and Ham, even follows the hero's journey. So it's so fascinating. Now, there is a counterpart to this book called The Heroine's Journey. So my question is, do our boys' books have to follow the hero's journey, and do our girl books have to follow the heroine's journey? So let's talk about the differences between the two. Okay. So typically, in the hero's journey, right, the core driving point is independence, mastery, and triumph. So if we have a hero, these are the things that they need to learn. This is what's driving them to pursue their goal. In the heroine's journey, it's connection, healing, and integration. So one really famous story that follows the heroine's journey with a boy protagonist is Harry Potter. And boys and girls love this story. So Harry Potter, he's not really learning independence. He's definitely learning his own skill set, and he's learning to come into his magic abilities, right? But what he's really learning is how to connect with his friends, how he's learning how to connect with his magical community, and he has to heal. He has to heal from the pain of losing his parents. He has to heal, and he has to integrate himself into this new society that he didn't know existed. All right. As a hero's journey, you're learning independence, mastery, and triumph. So let's take The Hobbit. And I'm using these examples because I think everybody knows what they are. Frodo is also on a journey with his friends, but he's constantly trying to push them away, right? Like Sam, who is so amazing, right? He's always trying to push Sam away. Like, kudos to Sam, JRR, for not letting Sam give up, right? Frodo bore this burden alone, and he had to master it, and he had to triumph over it. Okay, the conflict type is always external versus internal. So the hero's journey, he has to save the world, versus the heroine's journey, where typically what they're doing is trying to overcome their own, their own set of, obstacles. Okay, and then in the resolution, right, they're going to conquer something. They're going to dominate over something. That's our hero's journey. Whereas in our heroine's journey, they're going to heal, and they're going to return home. They're like Moana. Take Moana, for instance. This is a heroine's journey. She does go out it is an external journey that she goes on, but in the end, all she has to do is come back home. She has to heal the heart of Nefiti, and that heals her people, right? So on the one hand, it is an external thing, but her internal battle is that she has to go out and do it. And it is internal. She couldn't heal that by staying on the island. She had to do that. Okay, so I'm not going to go over each of these, but our symbolic focus, you've got, there's always like you have a sword, like, right, Frodo has the ring. They have something that they're going to wield, they're going to carry with them. All the characters in The Hobbit have, their special, magic or whatever. But in the heroine's journey, right, it's going to be their heart and their community. They're going to learn something from the people that they are serving. And you got your motivation, your antagonist. And the antagonist is really interesting because there's always going to be like a firm villain, right? There's always going to be somebody you can point to. And in the heroine's journey, it's typically going to be more of, your inner turmoil. So with Harry Potter, for instance, yes, he has Voldemort, and that is his antagonist, but he also has, like, is he good enough? And that's what ultimately he can beat him because he's good enough, right? Okay, so that's just really interesting. I won't spend too much time on that. But the hero's journey doesn't have to be male or female. And the point is that when we have a blending of these two things, when we have a blending of the hero and the heroine, we're able to, once again, have this more well-rounded idea of a character. And therefore, the people reading the book can have a much better grasp on just characters. Okay. So first of all, before we get to the next question, are boys, so first of all, we've established that, you know what, let's go back. So why do we have this problem? And all I can say is why I have this problem. Why do I have a problem in my house where my daughters are reading books about boys and boy stories with boy leads, and my sons aren't? Well, the problem is me. We have thousands of books in our house, and we have dozens of stories. Now, I love the classics. And I did a big deep dive. In fact, I have this whole chart. In fact, can you even see it? I created this whole chart. I don't know how well you can tell that. Okay, so I have titles from pre-1900, and these are all very well-known stories. So we've got Treasure Island, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Little Women, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Anne of Green Gables, Chronicles of Narnia, Phantom Tollbooth, right? All these books that we know. And do they follow, if they're boys, do they follow an external journey? Or if they're girls, do they follow an internal journey? Right? I was doing this whole, I love spreadsheets. It's super nerdy. But they just organize your information so cleanly. You can see everything so well. So anyway, and then I wanted to know of the books published. So I did a section on pre-1950, pre-1900, 1900 to 1950, 1950 to 1980, 1980 to 2000, and 2000 and beyond, right? The turn of the century. Do boy characters dominate the marketplace? And the answer unequivocally is yes. So yes, they do. And that harkens back to our society, right? Our society, boys dominate our society for good or bad. They do, and they always have. And when we start to see a shift is at the turn of the century. We start to see a shift in what's being published around the year 2000. Now, I do not take issue with boys being in leadership roles. I don't take an issue with men leading the family, leading in work, right? I am a stay-at-home mom. I don't take issue with this model, but what I do take issue with is unequal representation. So are we valuing stereotypes, or is this about representation? So what are the other kind of tropes we see? That's what I would love to hear from you guys. What kind of tropes do you see in books, right? You never see like the mean boys, right? The mean people in the books are always the girls. Boys are called bullies, right? Because again, they're dominating, and girls are internal and they feel threatened or they feel insecure. And so there's always the mean girls, right? So there's tons and tons of stereotypes in books. And we start to see this shift around the year 2000 where we start to break out of this. So I just read an amazing story. I already alluded to it, but it's called The Midnight Hour. And if you're a fan of Harry Potter, then you would probably love this story. It's got a female lead character in it. And she is super, super quick witted. She's really funny. Um, and she's really, really quick witted. And she always says she has the gift of gab, but it's written, it's a UK book. And so it doesn't necessarily mean like she can talk. It does mean that, but it means she's going to be really, really kind of snarky. And she definitely is. Anyway, she totally saves the day. She has to save the world. And it's so great. It's such a great story. It's a trilogy. It's really, really interesting. Absolutely love it. And it is a female lead following the hero's journey. And it was published 2018, I believe. And that's when we start to see, after the year 2000 is when we start to see this shift in publishing trends. Now, publishers, I can tell you as an author, publishers will always dictate what is being published. They will always dictate what goes out in the market. And authors know this all too well because we're always being told this is what you need to have in your book, and this is what the market wants, and this is what you should include. Excuse me. And so you can blame authors, you can blame society, you can blame culture, but somebody is telling the publishers what to print. And it's not necessarily the people. Like, for instance, I love all right, of course, they're not there. But I love Sandra Boynton books. I love rhyming books. I love sing-song books where I can like read them to my kids and we can practice all the rhymes and we can sing song. But publishers don't want those anymore. They are out. And bookstores don't print old books either. So even if they're super popular, they only keep one or so on the shelf because there's so many new books coming to print all the time. And if you do write a story, it probably won't go to print for a whole year. So one of the seminars that I listened to at the writers conference was a high school teacher who had written a book, and she had written about an experience in high school. And so she was giving a lecture on like, how do you include school settings in your stories? And one of the things she said was, don't ever include any slang. So like if you're writing a book right now, you're not going to write 6, 7 in it because in a year from now, when that finally goes to print, it's not going to be relevant anymore. And in fact, I'm trying to remember what story a TV show we were watching. And it was that new one where they go to that new town. Anyway, this is besides the point. But anyway, they were calling each other bro the whole time. It was supposed to be set back in like 2005, I think. I'm like, nobody was calling each other bro back in 2005, right? Like, that's what we're saying now. Everybody's calling each other bro. It drives me crazy. I will take 6, 7 over bro every day of the week, but that's neither here nor there. So, yeah. So, moving on. We got this shift in seeing more female leads and seeing more characters with female characters following a hero's journey and more male characters following a heroine's journey around to the year 2000. So that is very cool because now we're getting just more well-rounded stories that our kids can read. But back to the point. Yes, this is my fault. It's my fault my son has not read more books, any books with female characters. So I prefer myself like more of an ensemble cast because I think you're going to get a lot more interesting character dynamics when you have that, and you're going to have a lot more interplay, right? Harry Potter does really good in that. Chronicles of Narnia, we get a lot of different perspectives in that. One of the books I'm writing, there's 2 best friends, and it's a boy and a girl, so you get to see both sides of it, and that's really cool. So I think the question is then, what should we force our kids to read stories that okay. So this goes back to the question, like, okay, why is it my fault? And should we force our kids to read stories that maybe they're not drawn to? So my daughter, she really likes like middle grade, young adult, like adventure stories. That's what she loves. And she likes modern day. She does not like the classics, but my son, he does. He's read like Watership Down and Crime and Punishment and Moby Dick, and he loves the classics. So I started talking about this. So why has he read more books with male characters? Because he's read the classics, and males dominated stories really up until 2000, especially up until 1960. We saw a little bit with the women's suffrage and with women's voting rights and all of that, but not anything like we're seeing now, and not even really enough, not enough really to statistically relevant. So that's why. So, and I really wanted to, I'm like, oh, read the classics. The classics are so great. You should totally read the classics, not realizing what I was doing. And then he got into Lord of the Rings. And my goodness, this kid loves the Lord of the Rings. And so it was like adventure tales, like wild, like epic adventure stories. And they're all about boys, all of them. Whereas my daughter, she loves modern, adventure, quick paced, fast paced, quick, get the show on the road and get it going. And so she's going to be reading a lot more stuff like that. In fact, I tried to introduce her to Anne of Green Gables, and perhaps maybe that's really like sexist to me. I was like, maybe you'll like this. And she did eventually read it when she was a little bit older. But I really just wanted her to read the classics, and I was shoving everything at her. She didn't like The Wrinkle in Time until she was a little bit older. I had hoped she would like it when she was younger. It doesn't really matter. I just was like really trying to like give all my kids all these books that I loved. So I had my son, when I realized, I was like, okay, I got a whole list of books that I would love you to read that have female lead characters. And you don't have to exclusively read these, but these of the type of genre that you like to read, you can include these titles in there too. So Midnight Hours, actually, we'll do all the books at the end. So he just finished A Wrinkle in Time, read it. I was going to say Wrinkle Time, read it in record time, is on to the second book. And I asked him, I was like, okay, are you reading the second book because I told you I wanted you to read it, or are you reading the second book because you loved it? And he's like, no, I loved it. I thought it was really cool. So it's not that he doesn't want to read female characters. It's that either he hasn't been exposed to them, or they're just not the type of genre that he likes. And I spent a lot of time at the beginning of the stream talking about, should we read outside of our genre? Yeah, totally. Should we read? But that doesn't mean we have to read everything outside of our genre, right? And it also doesn't mean that we have to read a book that's outside of our genre that's insanely boring. Like going back to the Unselected Journals of Emma Lyons, everybody's read it. Everybody loves it. And I'm just like, I don't want to read it. And it's not her journals. It's not her journals, because she's recanting like exact conversations with quotation marks. It drives me crazy. I am a huge proponent, in my opinion. Don't read a story that you don't have interest in, right? Give it 2 chapters or 10 pages and move on with your life. The Ranger's Apprentice is a middle grade adventure novel with a boy protagonist that is so terrible for the first, I think, like 3 chapters, but somebody recommended it to me. Actually, my friend that works at Scholastic recommended it to me. And I was like, I don't want to tell them I didn't like this book. So I like skipped ahead, and I was like, and then I read like all 11 of them. There's 8 to 11. I can't remember, but man, the beginning of your book is so essential, because if people don't like that, they are not going to keep reading. And I say, don't do it. I say, don't read it if you don't love it. If somebody recommended it to you, maybe skip ahead, see if you like it. Okay. So, we can talk a little bit more about why characters are mostly male, but I think we kind of nailed it. I actually did a little bit of research about, you've got ancient civilizations, and they're all patriarchal societies. Legal, political authority, military authority is all male dominated. There are a few periods. Okay, classical and imperial eras, same thing. There is an exception in Egypt, and Egypt was ruled by queens. But what's interesting is that when women rule, they don't suppress men. But when men rule, they do suppress women. Okay, we've got early modern period. We have an exception with Elizabeth I and Catherine the Great. And they were really powerful monarchs, but they still upheld this patriarchal society. Okay. We've got the industrial and modern area. That's where we had the women's suffrage movement. And then we've got the contemporary period, which seems ridiculous because we're grouping 1945 and 2025 as the same like contemporary period. That seems crazy to me. But obviously a lot has changed in just, like my lifetime, a lot has changed. But it really started before me. But that's why the characters are mostly male. They're mostly male because that is what has dominated society. That's what's dominated culture. And not just in one particular country, but since ancient civilization. That's just how it's been. And then we have to ask ourselves, right, why? And what is our example? So we have our real world example where we can look around and see what our example is. But then we also have our one tried and true example, which is the Bible, right? And I don't know. I don't know what people think when they look at the Bible. But when I was younger, you just kind of take it for granted. You're like, oh, this is the Bible. It's God's word and it's true. And it's everything in there is accurate and correct. And this is what we should live by. But really, like the Bible has been written by dozens of authors. There's still ancient writings they're finding all the time, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls, we're finding ancient writings all the time. And they're not in the Bible because the Bible was already compiled, and it was compiled by patriarchal societies that decided what books should go in there, translate it. Who knows what they took out? Who knows what they left in? We don't have anything original anymore. And the Bible does represent a very male-centered, dominating society. And then we put that on God, even though the word God in Hebrew is plural. And we all know that no creature exists without male and female. Plants don't exist without male and female. Reptiles, amphibians, mammals, plants, invertebrate, everything has to have male and female. It just does. Okay, but that's a whole tangent. That's an entirely other discussion. Okay. So and this really is what I feel like the discussion comes down to for me, is when we read books, when we don't ask our boys to read books by girl stories, or we don't present by girl with girl protagonists, or if we don't ask our boys, or we don't present our boys with opportunities to do this, we are perpetuating this boys will be boys mentality, right? Boys will be boys. But when are we going to suggest that boys will be men? Eventually, at some point, these boys will turn into men, but we don't ever make this transition to say, this is when you stop being a boy and this is when you start being a man. We just continue to allow them to exist in this society where they don't have to be. And there's a lot of examples of this. Like, so for instance, you've got boys can go home and they can play video games all they want, and parents have no issues with it. Oh, my kid loves to play video games, and it's awesome. Like, that's what he loves to do. But then if you want to have a career in that, you're an idiot. Like, I will tell that you firsthand. My husband, who has a career in video games and now teaches college and is actually creating video game programs for students. Like, it is the number one money making career in the world, but parents just treat it like a hobby, right? They're like, oh, it's so cute, he's playing video games, but then he's an idiot, right? Men are idiots if they want to play video games as adults. And of course, is there a balance? Like, sure. But if you think that men are idiots that play video games, why are you letting your son play it? I mean, I think that's an honest question. And then what's the inverse, right? I have twins, same age. My daughter gets asked to babysit all the time. And I get asked on this mom thread in my neighborhood, is there anybody's daughter that can babysit? And I'm like, well, my daughter or my son could babysit. my son's actually probably be better with kids than my daughter. He has a lot more patience. And they're like, no, just the girl, just the girl. But then we want our men to not babysit their kids, right? That they created those children. They're not helping with the kids. Those are their kids. But we've told them their whole life, you're not capable of taking care of children. You're not capable of babysitting. You're not capable of rearing children or being kind or empathetic or patient. We tell them their whole lives they're not capable of doing that. And then when they're married, we're like, well, you better be a good partner, you better be a good spouse, you better know all about menstruation and that time of the month, and you better know about cooking and cleaning, you better know about babies, you better know how to change diapers, you better know all these things, even though they were never taught. So does this go back to reading books with girl characters? Like 100%. Everything that we are teaching our children in their youth is going to exist with them, is going to ride with them throughout their whole life. These are all things that are going to shape who they become. It's going to shape who they want to be, who they need to be, how they're going to be successful in the world. And I will die on this hill that we are not teaching our boys to be men. We're teaching them to be boys. And everybody wants to decry the saying, boys will be boys. But what are you doing about changing the mentality of boys will be boys to boys will be men? Because that is essentially the core of the problem right there. Okay, so does this create a power imbalance in men and women as adults? So we talked about it as children, but yeah, of course it does, right? All the same reasons, right? If men haven't learned, if boys haven't learned how to talk about their feelings, if boys haven't learned how to be sympathetic to other characters, if other situations, other things they haven't experienced. And that's really what reading comes down to, is we have a very limited scope of what we experience, especially as children. When we get to be adults, we can spend our money and we can travel and we can do other things. But when we're living in our parents' house, our parents really determine what we can experience and where we can go and what we're going to be able to do. So we read books so that we can explore worlds and we can see how other people react in situations. And we can say, I want to react that way, or I want to be kind like that, or I want to be courageous like that. I want to be able to do those things. And it doesn't have to be, like in Dune, right? You're not going to go, the reality of you going and living on another planet and saving the world. It's not going to happen, but you can still exemplify those types of characteristics that our heroes do and our heroines do. And we can look at their life experiences in a story and we can say, I want to be like that. So absolutely, if our boys are only reading stories where they only see themselves or putting themselves in the shoes where they're dominating, they will grow up and do that. They absolutely will, because it becomes part of their perspective. Now, when you talk about characters, right, we're saying, oh, it's just pretend, or it's just a story. It's fiction, right? Fiction is not truth, but it is up here. We live the stories we read. These characters become real. They become part of our lives. Listen to any child talk about a story they've read, and it is a lived experience. It is something they have absolutely lived through. And that is what a good author does, right? It takes you through the whole gamut of emotions. It makes you feel this wide range of feelings and thoughts, and you're on this wild ride, and it becomes part of you. It becomes this shared experience. And when kids talk about these books, they're reliving it. And that is a way for them to branch off and explore their world, right? As small as it might be, if kids don't ever travel or they don't ever experience new things outside of the like maybe city or state that they live in, they can still go explore. They can still go have these massively wild and incredible adventures and experience what it's like. And on the inverse of that, they can also say, I don't want to be like Draco Malfoy, right? Or I don't want to be one of those mean girls or bullies, or I don't want to live this stereotype, or I wouldn't act that way, right? Counting by sevens. Like if you've read Counting by Sevens, it's a beautiful account of a girl whose parents die. It's like, and who becomes her friends? Like, do we want to become her friend? And those types of stories, if our boys aren't reading those types of stories, where do they learn it? Like, that is a legitimate, honest question. If our boys are not reading stories about people who live through hard things, how do they learn or ask themselves how they would act in a certain situation? And it is unfair. It is absolutely unfair for us to expect so much from adult men when they didn't learn it from either their parents or stories, or they just didn't learn it in their childhood. How can we expect men to be any different than what they're presented with? Should they just know it inherently? Should they just be able to say, all I ever did was read books about dominance and overpowering and being the center of attention, and then not expect to be the center of attention? Like, we are the product of what we experience in life. It's just true. Okay. Okay. So I don't think I actually said this, but should we force our children to read stories they don't like? So I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I would argue that to a point we should, just as much as we should, in regards to anything else. We force our children to do math, right? We force our children to go to school and learn individual specific subjects. We force our children to do a lot of things. We force our children to do their chores at home. We force them to clean their rooms or make their bed or change their sheets or take a shower, right? We force our kids to do stuff all the time, every day, day in and day out. Is slogging through a book any different? Maybe, right? Because that's a little bit, okay, to back up to, like, this is part of like a lived experience. This is something that we're experiencing. And if we are miserable the whole time, maybe not so great. But is every book written with, if you're trying to tell me that every book with a female character will be miserable for a boy, that's just not fair. It's just not. It's not true. It's not fair. It's not accurate. Find the books that your boys love to read. Find the genre that they love to read and give them a book with a female author. And we're going to go over, with a female character. And we're going to go over that. We're going to go over titles with boy character leads and girl character leads. And throughout the, lots of time periods. I do also think that we should read books outside of our preferred genre, just to give ourselves a taste of new topics. So I say this a lot to my children, but like, one of the things I loved about college was I got to choose what classes I wanted to take. And man, I was so excited. I was like, I want to take something. I didn't know what how many times do kids change their majors when they get to college because they didn't know that they were interested in something, so interested in it that they want to like make it their life study until they were exposed to it. So yeah, I say expose your kids to a whole bunch of stuff and encourage them to read books. And maybe they start it and they're like, well, I don't love it. Do I have to finish it? Maybe you don't have to finish it. Maybe try another thing and see layer upon layer upon layer of what you love, what you find interesting, what really drives you and motivates you and inspires you and interests you, right? So yeah, I think so. I'd love to hear what you have to think. Should we force our kids to read books with other characters in it? Maybe not. And yeah, should we force our kids to read genres that they don't love? I'd love to hear your opinion. All right, so now I want to share with you my book list. Okay, so this is impossible. Okay, this is absolutely impossible to really give you all of my favorite books. But what I wanted to do was kind of show you that there are a lot of titles. So I'm focusing this specifically on the hero's journey or the heroine's journey. So these are really adventure stories because this is really what middle grade young adult kids want to read, is these adventure stories. So my list is primarily focused on stories where a character saves something or somebody. So, and most of these I discovered, I thought were the hero's journey, even though they're female leads. So this is a list of both male leads and female leads and characters. Okay. So we've got our classics, right? And most of our classics, they're going to harken back to 1900s, right? Okay, so um, Little Women is okay. We're going to start with the girls. Okay, so Little Women is a great story. Now, will most kids love it in this day and age where everything's hyper technology and like Ready Player One and online all the time? Like this will be a definite learning experience for them to see what life was like as a woman, right? It was written in 1868. 1868. But I think this is a great title when we want to teach our kids really, really something outside of their comfort zone and have a very historical perspective within a fictional setting. Or is it so fictional? Okay. We've also got The Story of the Treasure Seekers. Now, this was a new one to me. I actually haven't read this one, but when I was researching like really great stories with female leads. So this is their family's financial stability and they have to, they have to save their family's financial stability and honor by trying various, often comical schemes to restore their lost fortune, right? Pre-1900, everybody had a fortune that they had to like manage and save and like, right? No more, no entrepreneurship, no American dream, no going out and fighting, just working hard, none of that. So I thought that was a really good, and it's with a female lead. So I thought it was really cool. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Are you surprised to know that was written in 1865? I was. I mean, we have our Disney version, and I'm not even sure when that was created. Can anybody tell me in the comments? Um, 1951. So almost 100 years after the book came out. And that's what I always think of, the animated version. But yeah, that was written in the mid 1800s. And, you can make all sorts of, whether she was on drugs or not, but it really is a stark, like, where can you find more imagination, right? You eat something, you grow, you eat something else and you shrink, and you've got a talking rabbit and the queen, you have to overcome the queen, right? Really, really cool. Okay. On the boy side, right, you've got Tom Sawyer, iconic Tom Sawyer builds a raft and travels down the Mississippi River. I mean, so cool. And really, every boy wants to live that life, right? Every boy wants to just go discover who he is and what he's made of and what he can accomplish, right? So that's a really great story for boys because they see it can be done. Right. And there's lots of like Treasure Island, The Prince and the Pauper, all of those. They're so time period, right? Right? Fortunes and overcoming, pirates and all of that. So let's move on to the 1900s. Okay. So I think every child should read the Chronicles of Narnia. Who doesn't want to open up a door? I still have dreams that we buy a new house and there's like a hidden door somewhere. I mean, all the time. And it doesn't necessarily go to another world, but it goes to like another hidden part of the house that we didn't know existed. It's like, that is so incredibly cool. The House of Leaves. Has anybody read The House of Leaves? I think that's what it's called. Let me just double check. Oh my gosh. House of Leaves is the scariest book. I mean, I couldn't finish it. I could not finish it, but it is about a house that grows. Okay, Coraline. Coraline is actually on my list. Female lead, obviously, but this idea of opening a doorway, right? It's like a portal. House of Leaves is the scariest book I've ever read. It's by Mark D. Danielewski, and it is so scary. I don't know if I'm older now if I could read it or if it would scare me even more. Okay. Let me find my list. Okay. But yeah, so the Chronicles of Narnia, and that's great because it's an ensemble cast. You've got both boys and girls, and you really see the way. Now they're very prim and proper, right? And they have Aslan, however you want to pronounce it. But what's really cool in this story to me about characters for kids is that they are learning how to like assimilate into a new society. And that's really rough, right? Kids do that all the time. Kids do that way more than adults do. But this is really, really stark. And they don't just do it, but they do it really well. All right. Peter Pan, if you didn't know this, this was a book first. And it's a great story too. It's really, really great. And it's a classic pirate story. So, and Call of the Wild. So Call of the Wild, and there's a lot of more recent books like Call of the Wild, right? So you've got like the Hatchet. Who wrote the Hatchet? Why can't I remember? Gary Paulson. Yes. And Gary Paulson wrote a whole bunch of books. And that again, that harkens a lot to Tom Sawyer. Like, these are stories that our boys want to read because they want to test their mettle. I mean, that really is a masculine character trait, that they want to test what they're capable of doing. They're strong, and they want to test how strong they are. They want to test how much they can do, how strong their fortitude is. And so those types of stories are always so great for boys. And I'm not sure if we discussed it. I don't think we did. So I'll just touch on it for a second. But do our girls want stories where they can test their own fortitude too? Like, yes. And that again is why our boys are reading, is why our girls are reading these same stories, because they want to test themselves too. Girls don't want to be stuck in a kitchen or stuck having babies. They want to have, right? We all want to have it all. Men want to have it all, right? We hear that all the time. Well, so do girls. Girls want to have all these amazing experiences too. And The Wonderful Wizard of Oz on the female side of things, that is a classic for a reason. And no boy says, I'm not watching The Wizard of Oz because there's a girl in it. They watch it because it's so dang cool. A twister lifts you up, puts you in another land. There's a munchkins and it's so cool, right? There's a yellow brick road and you have to go meet like the big guy and you overtake him and the wizard. And it's so cool. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up just because we've been talking for a long time, but I'll just go over some of my other books. So A Wrinkle in Time, I already talked about that. It's an amazing story. So cool. It really, right? It's a really good initiation into sci-fi. Another really great book I wrote, Last Day on Mars, for sci-fi fans. That's a really great one. Island of the Blue Dolphins and The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. If you haven't read that one, that's a great one too. I talked about my son reading this, but like Watership Down, James and the Giant Peach, anything by Roald Dahl is going to be so great. And he did a great job writing both boy and girls. And he got away with it, right? Because he was so loved. He was such a loved, beloved author, and he could get away with it because he was so good at it. And really, I think that's what it boils down to is, yes, we have a male dominated society or culture. We have historically, but also because males dominated, we also had men that were able to write, and they wrote what they knew, right? Before we had access to the internet, before we had access to really go investigate a lot, men wrote about what they knew, and they were afforded the opportunity to write, whereas women really weren't. You've got like Jane Austen, and you've got Charlotte, oh my gosh, Charlotte Bronte, right? And oh my gosh, come on, Wuthering Heights, Emily Bronte, right? Sure, the sisters, right? But that's because they had money. They had so much money that they could just do it, right? So much of, and there's a lot of statistics about why boys won't read female novels, why boys won't read novels written by women. And what's hard to parse out with the data, and they don't necessarily say if they factored in the fact that men really just don't even read. And I'll put the stuff in the notes, but women have men, the amount of books that women read compared to men is double. So then you've got men that don't read as many novels written by women Well, they're also not reading as many novels, period. So if you're comparing the two and you're like, well, women read male authors and female authors, but men don't read as many. Well, they're also not reading as many books. So it's hard to parse out the data and say, well, what is like the margin of error? Because if they're just not reading, and are men reading like business books or entrepreneur books, like my husband reads a lot of books for his profession, and they're not necessarily fictional books. And so um and then you've got people in professions that's predominantly male. I mean, there's so many factors. It's really hard for me to be able to accept the fact that men just won't read books by women. Do I think that happens? Absolutely. Of course I do. But do I think it's statistically relevant and is a standard across the board? I don't know about that. I don't know. Okay, well, thank you for tuning in with us this week. I thought that was a really exciting conversation. It really led me down this rabbit hole that I didn't really think it was going to take me in. I really just thought it was a matter of, well, read some books about girls. What's the big deal? And it ended up being a lot. There ended up being a lot more to it than that. Next week, we are going to talk about what is on everybody's mind. And it is Erica Kirk grieving the right way? And how do you grieve the right way? So we are going to talk about that. Now, you might ask, well, who are you? There's actually a pretty popular video going around where somebody assesses her body language. She's an actress, and she says that Erica Kirk's behavior is just bad acting. So we're going to talk about, is Erica Kirk acting? Is she grieving the right way? What is the right way to grieve? And when is it time to stop grieving? Now, I'm not going to give anything away. I have a lot of comments to talk about it. But what I will say is, I first started, actually, that's not true. We started this podcast about 6 years ago. But about a year later, our son died. And I opened up our lives to our audience. Now, it wasn't because I wanted you all to know what it felt like or what it was. In fact, I turned the comments off, and I didn't let really anybody have their own say into it. But I did it because the whole reason we started our vlog, our YouTube channel, was because we were losing memories of our lives. We would go on trips. Our diapers on a plane. We would go on trips with our kids, and we would go travel with them. And then we would come home and we'd be like, remember when we did this? And we wouldn't have any tangible evidence of it. And it wasn't like evidence like, I'm going to present this to you. It was like, I want to go back. I want to go back and see what the children looked like doing this thing. Or I want to go back and see, what this place looked like. I can't quite remember. Or was it, did this happen when we went here, or did this happen? Because your memory's fuzzy. And in fact, I just watched our very first number one video, the very first video we ever did on this channel. And that's what I said in it. I said, I want to preserve our memories. And so when our son died, I told my husband, this is going to be impossible, but we have to sit down and talk about what happened, because we won't have this forever. We will move. Time will pass, and our memories will fade. And I have to know, I have to be able to watch and look at what happened again and again and again and again, because it will fade. And so that's what we did. And I wanted to revisit this. I've wanted to revisit what grief looks like now 5 years later. And this seems like a good time to do it. So I hope you'll tune in with me. I hope you'll tune in with me next week. And I would love to hear your thoughts about what's going on. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.